I'm a headliner. I'm a headliner.
Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Week 6, baby. Wide receivers. Who are we starting? Who are we sitting? Who's going to dominate? Who's going to have a down week? And who's going to lead you to a fantasy win in week 6? Before we jump in to all the good information, though, I got to pick a winner from last week's video. If you were around then, you saw that we were giving away a Juju jersey, autographed Kansas City jersey. Well, we got a winner for that, giving it away to IIG. I've been playing fantasy sports for years, but this season is the first I thought to turn to YouTube for tips. I've watched a lot of channels. You guys are by far the best, and the intro song and beat is amazing. Appreciate you, IIG. Send us an email, info@thefantasyheadliners.com. Make sure it comes from the email associated with your YouTube account, and we'll get you that autographed Juju jersey as soon as possible. But like I said, the main point of this video is wide receivers. We got a lot of matchups to cover this week, and first and foremost is going to be a crappy Thursday night football matchup. Now, come on, Washington and Chicago, prove me wrong. Have a great matchup, but I am worried about this one. However, we do have somebody listed as a start for the first time in a couple of weeks. But before that, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, both of them are going to be starts for me. Now, I don't love this matchup, but we know Logan Thomas is beat up. We know that Jahan Dotson is beat up, probably going to miss this week again. I feel like I got to stick with McLaurin here, and hopefully he scores a touchdown. The production and the volume haven't been great, but haven't been awful either. He's still getting more than enough targets that even in a difficult matchup, when you're missing a lot of other weapons around you, you could end up seeing more than enough to get you across those 10 fantasy points that we're really trying to look for. And then Curtis Samuel, I mean, more than likely, he's going to be absolutely fine. Even if it's a more difficult matchup, the ability to move Curtis Samuel around and do some different things with him, they put him in situations to win. And that's why his production and volume are both in the top 24 right now. Yep, not a great matchup. Again, mentioned it already, but the X factor is there for him. He's going to be a start for me. I am going to go back to Darnell Mooney as a start this week. Washington allows the 5th most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. Is it Darnell Mooney week? We've seen a little bit of a tick up over the last couple of weeks, and yeah, the Bears aren't throwing it nearly as much as we would like, but I'm going to get a little risky, and I'm going to get a little crazy, and I'm going to put Darnell Mooney as a start this week. Now, there's way more risk than there is reward, and that's why his total is only at 15, but in a better matchup where hopefully they're going to have to throw it a little bit, Mooney finally has his big game of the season. San Francisco at Atlanta, and I was conflicted with this one because Atlanta allows the 6th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, and I really want to start Brandon Ayuk this week. I really do. But since Jimmy Garoppolo has taken over, we've seen, again, more of a situation where the San Francisco offense is about spreading the ball around and getting it to a whole bunch of different guys and just doing whatever it takes to score points. This isn't like a high explosive offense. They don't have a guy that they're going to consistently. They're not chucking the ball down the field. This is a really good matchup for George Kittle as well, and I'm really hoping that he bounces back. But for me and Brandon Ayuk, I really want to start him. I really do, and that's why his total comes in at a 14. The matchup is there. The X factor is a little bit on the lower side because we haven't seen a whole lot from him. Production and volume numbers aren't there, so I couldn't justify putting him as a start this week. However, if he were to be a good play this week, I would not be surprised whatsoever. But we can afford to sit a guy like Brandon Ayuk this week because more than likely you aren't relying on him anyway. So even if you do sit him and he were to have a good game, more than likely you already had somebody else in over him that had a higher ceiling. So I don't think sitting him this week is all that bad. With Debo, we'd like to see a little bit more volume, but the production is there, and that's what matters most for him. For the Atlanta Falcons, though, I mean, London's banged up. Pitts is hurting. No Cordero Patterson. I'm not trusting anyone right now on this offense going up against, arguably the NFL's top defense. New England and Cleveland. If this were the running back episode, this would be my Manscaped must-watch matchup, but it's not. But I'm excited to watch Ramondre Stevenson and Nick Chubb go toe-to-toe. That's going to be a lot of fun. But on the wide receiver side, there's not a whole lot of options here, but we do have two pretty darn good options. Jakobi Meyers is going to be a start for me. He's number one in this offense, and if you look at the per game numbers right now, he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. Yeah, he missed a game, but again, look at those per game numbers, and he's still showing up. He should be an auto start every single week. Right now, he's top 12 among wide receivers in fantasy points per game, and he's top 24 in targets per game among wide receivers. Those are both great numbers to have, and we're going to want those in this matchup this week. Amari Cooper for Cleveland, he's going to be a for sure start this week. The volume is there, the production is there. Chubb is really doing a great job this season of shouldering the workload and understanding that the passing game wasn't going to be as good as what they would have liked it to be. And because of that, he was going to have to play very well. And guess what? He is. You can't stop Nick Chubb. But because of that, it is opening up those lanes in the passing game where we're able to find Amari Cooper for really, really solid production. We'll see what happens over the coming weeks as Deshaun Watson nears his return. But for right now, for me, Amari Cooper continues to be a guy that's in our lineup. The New York Jets at the Green Bay Packers bring a couple of middle-of-the-road matchups here. Now, looking at the New York Jets, we've got to go with Corey Davis and we got to go with Garrett Wilson, and Elijah Moore has to go to the side right now. The talent is there. He used to have the connection with Zach Wilson, but there was multiple things that were concerning coming into this season. And when you add a guy like Garrett Wilson, it's going to have to take away from somebody. And during the preseason, I tried to remind you all that Corey Davis is still a very good wide receiver. He's not high floor, or he's not high ceiling. He's not a guy that's going to win you weeks, but he's a guy that at the NFL level is going to be serviceable for this New York Jets team, and they have used him as such. This is a tough matchup going up against Green Bay. Elijah Moore is going to be going to the bench for me this week. Wilson, for me, he's tied for 20th in targets, and there is still room to grow there for him. Corey Davis is more of a risky start. Again, like I mentioned, he doesn't have a whole lot of upside, but if you're missing a lot of wide receivers, if you're in the bye weeks and things are crazy for you, injuries and whatnot, Corey Davis is a guy that could at least bring you, 10 fantasy points. If he scores a touchdown, he gets a little bit closer to 16. May not happen, but it's still a guy that, again, really safe floor right now based on his production so far this year. Garrett Wilson, obviously with the upside there, though. For the Green Bay Packers, Lazard and the Dubs are both going to be starts for me this week. I feel like the Jets defense has kind of underperformed, which I'm being highly critical of them, and I shouldn't be because they've actually been pretty darn good this season. But it just feels like that these corners are lockdown corners. They haven't quite locked down yet. They've given up some bigger plays and things of that nature, but they still have played well. Don't get me wrong. I like what they're doing there in New York. Green Bay isn't going to want to lose to two New York teams on back-to-back weeks, though. It's not going to want to happen. I expect Green Bay to come out, to throw the ball, to have some offensive firepower, to be a little bit more energized this week, we'll say. And if that happens, I definitely think both of these guys can end up being starts. Lazard is a little bit more touchdown dependent for me right now. We'll see how the volume and the production kind of tend to even out over the next couple of weeks. Dobbs was making a case as the wide receiver one there, though, so keep an eye on how that shapes up coming out. Jacksonville and Indianapolis could end up being locked in a defensive battle. Listen, both teams are top 7 and fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. We knew that Indianapolis was going to be good at the beginning of the season. We talked about their defense. They have had some issues this season, especially with no Shaquille Leonard out there. But Jacksonville's defense is actually playing very, very well. And their defensive line is no joke. And that's part of the reason why their defense has been so good is because they're causing so much pressure. Now, Christian Kirk has been pretty quiet the last couple of weeks. Last week didn't do a whole lot of anything. The week before really was based on 2 catches. So we've seen him really slow down a little bit. We want to get him ticking back up, but this is not the matchup that it's likely going to happen. Wouldn't be surprised if he has a slower start this week, and he is going to be a slower day this week, and he is going to be a risky start for me. I am not really looking forward to the upside that Christian Kirk could offer. Now, for Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce, I want to start Alec Pierce, okay? You're going to tell me in this video that I'm disrespecting him, and I understand your concerns with that. I'm not disrespecting him, though, because weeks ago, I was the guy that talked about him and said, if things start to shape up and this offense forms out the way that we would hope, Alec Pierce could definitely be a guy that becomes a deep threat for this team. Now, has the offense done what it's supposed to? No, but Pierce is starting to carve out a very nice role. But again, this is a very tough matchup going up against Jacksonville. 7th fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. We know that Jacksonville defensive line can get after the quarterback. Indianapolis has already had issues this year protecting Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan hasn't had a whole lot of times. This could absolutely be a miss for me with Alec Pierce. The reason I'm going with Michael Pittman over him, though, is because Michael Pittman is still the wide receiver one. If I wanted to trust somebody this week, it would be the guy that I've seen do it on a more consistent basis. And that's why I'm going to go back to Michael Pittman. Again, not a very high ceiling this week, but Pittman should have a decent enough floor that we could put in our lineup. Probably going to be a high-end wide receiver too. Should see the targets. And then hopefully Pierce, if you have to play him for some reason, he scores a touchdown or maybe has a big play or two. Minnesota at Miami has the makings of a fabulous matchup. Jalen Waddle's banged up, Tyreek Hill's banged up, and they're playing with a third-string quarterback, though. So the upside in this matchup goes to Minnesota. Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen going up against Miami that allow the 8th most fantasy points per game to wide receiver. Justin Jefferson obviously going to have a huge ceiling this week, just like he has for a majority of the year. Adam Thielen, to me, still a little bit more touchdown dependent, but this is still a really great matchup. He comes back to being a start for me. Hill and Waddle, we're going to have to monitor this throughout the week, but the problem is, for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, they're both top 10 wide receivers. How do you sit top 10 wide receivers in not a great matchup, but still a decent matchup? You can't. If they play, you've got to put them in your lineup because I guarantee you, come Monday, you're going to feel a lot worse about putting them in your lineup and getting a bad performance than leaving them out of your lineup and getting a great performance. Cincinnati at New Orleans is going to bring a lot of question marks. On the Cincinnati side of the ball, T. Higgins, I mean, he was questionable all last week, gets to the game, plays the first quarter, can't go the rest of the game. Obviously banged up right now. He needs to get healthy. We're going to keep an eye on that. Even if he plays this week, I'm probably going to sit him. Now, if he misses this week, though, Tyler Boyd could become a start. So you're going to want to keep an eye on the rankings videos to see if that happens. Chase will be a start. Higgins a sit no matter what at this point. Boyd potentially a start if Higgins does sit. Now, on the other side, Michael Thomas still trying to work his way back from an injury. Chris Olave, he's got the concussion protocol going on right now. Since he allows the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers, and a lot is going to depend on the health of both of these guys. As you can see, Thomas is a 15, Olave is a 16. They're high-risk starts for me this week. We'll see if Olave even ends up getting cleared in time. Make sure you check back on the rankings, though, for this entire matchup because a lot could change as the week goes on. In Baltimore versus the New York Giants, there's not a whole lot to see here, ladies and gentlemen. The Giants defense allows the 3rd fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Bateman's been beat up. He missed last week. Duvernay, I mean, trust me, I like the Duvs. I do. But he's so touchdown dependent. It's not, I mean, he's highly touchdown dependent. I can't take that here in such a tough matchup. A guy that really has to score to be reliable in your lineup, I can't do that this week. I'd rather risk a Darnell Mooney over the Duve this week for potential volume purposes. On the New York Giants side of the ball, I mean, this would be a great matchup for the Giants if they had decent wide receivers, which they don't right now. Baltimore allows the 3rd most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. Richie James, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson. I mean, guys are banged up. We've seen this team. I mean, Saquon Barkley's carrying them. They're having to be very unique on offense to put up the points that they need. Somebody could end up having a good game this week, but honestly, if you're trusting the New York Giants right now, your roster's probably on the edge of imploding anyway. Tampa Bay at Pittsburgh is going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. With the holidays coming up, head over to manscaped.com. Use code word headliners at checkout. You're going to get 20% off. You're going to get free shipping. And make sure you grab some stocking stuffers, some Christmas presents for the loved one and your life. Manscaped.com. Listen, Pittsburgh allows 48.78 fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. That is most in the league. If there was ever a matchup for Tom Brady, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense to get back on track, it would be this one. We're rolling out Mike Evans. We're rolling out Chris Godwin, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that the matchup plays out the way it shows on paper. For Pittsburgh, Deontay Johnson is going to be a start, and for the first time in a few weeks, George Pickens is going to be a start. I have a hard time seeing Pat Freiermuth be cleared this week. His third concussion in less than 12 months. I just can't see him being back on the field. It's going to be tough moving the ball on the ground. Najee Harris clearly is not 100%. Pickens could be in for a good week. This could be the week that he has an opportunity to now step up. Johnson is going to be volume-based, really going to be a safe start for you. Pickens is going to be the riskier start, but he's going to see the bigger plays and the bigger opportunity. He's got the ceiling this week. Carolina at the LA Rams, and y'all are going to think that I'm crazy once again, but I have got to go with my boy DJ Moore this week as a start. The Los Angeles Rams allow the fourth most fantasy points right now to opposing wide receivers, and I think this change in leadership and hopefully philosophy will have a look at this offense and say, Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore, we need to get the ball in their hands as much as possible. That is going to be the way to win. If that happens, then DJ Moore could end up having a very good week for you. It is a high-risk start, but he has 17 targets over the last 2 weeks. That's 9th among wide receivers in the NFL. He's clearly getting the volume. The production just hasn't been there. This could be the week where the production finally shows up. For the Los Angeles Rams, we're obviously going to start Cooper Kupp. There's no doubt there. I might as well remove Allen Robinson from this graphic, though. The guy hasn't done anything unless you play in a fantasy cross-country league. If you do, then you can get a lot of points for A-Rob for running a whole lot and doing nothing. Arizona at Seattle, and Seattle allows the 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers. Hollywood Brown has been absolutely balling out this season. We're going to continue to start him, but we're going to have to move away from Greg Dortch again this week, and Rondale Moore is not going to be a guy that we consider. Even in a tougher matchup for Marquise Brown, he's seeing so much volume right now, and him and Kyler Murray are so connected that we have to start him. He's one of those guys that has made it into that realm of startable every single week. Now, with DeAndre Hopkins due back very soon, we will continue to monitor how that works out, but I can't see Marquise Brown seeing too much of a drop-off. And if he does, it means that DeAndre Hopkins is performing very well, which maybe volume-wise hurts Marquise Brown, but continues to help him on the efficiency side. For Lockett and DK Metcalf, though, I mean, last week was supposed to be a tough matchup against New Orleans, and they ended up being just fine. This is a little bit of a tougher matchup as well, but Geno's locked in on these two guys, all right? These are where the targets are going to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. They continue to be kind of a little bit on the high risk side, but they're pretty safe as of this moment because of how much volume they're getting. And if Arizona can put up a fight with Seattle, where they're going to be throwing it a little bit, both of these guys will be easy starts. Buffalo at Kansas City is going to have the making of a huge game for both Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis. Kansas City allows the 7th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers right now, and I am locked in on Diggs and Davis, and this is why I've got 2 prize picks props to play this week for you. I'm going to take the over of 55.5 yards from Gabe Davis, and I'm also going to take the over of 85.5 yards from Stefon Diggs. I see a big game for Buffalo coming in this week. They're going to want to put it to Kansas City. Absolutely feel like they're going to be throwing it. They are not going to want this game to be close, and both of these guys are going to go over and have huge days for your fantasy teams. Now, for Kansas City, Buffalo allows the 6th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Different ends of the spectrum here right now with these two defenses. But what's worse than that is Kansas City has moved to a philosophy of spreading the ball around. Travis Kelce is always going to get his 4 touchdowns last week. Are you kidding me? And now for the wide receivers, we're just seeing passes to each one of them, targets to each one of them, targets out of the backfield. Jerick McKinnon is getting a little bit of a look now as well. I'm going to have to move on from all these guys at the current time. It's a tough matchup. No one is starter worthy right now, considering that they're all having these targets just spread out across the group. Dallas at Philadelphia, and the numbers show a decent matchup for a majority of your studs here. We'll see if that's the way it plays out, though. I feel like this is a weird kind of trap game. It's either going to be like big time scoring, or it's going to be like a defensive battle where everyone has trouble scoring. I don't think there's anything in the middle this week. Lamb saw another 8 targets in week 5, and he's now 9th in targets over the course of the season, even without Dak Prescott. The Eagles defense, though, they limit big plays. They allow the 9th most receptions to wide receivers, but they allow the 12th fewest yards. This is an opportunity where, yes, we could see a lot of targets going to CeeDee Lamb, but that ceiling could be a little bit lower. Maybe just a safe performer this week, but not a huge performer with the way they keep the ball in front of them. Gallup is interesting, though. I would like to potentially start him, but we're going to have to be able to push the ball down the field. Cooper Rush, not his best characteristic, so I'm going to wait for Michael Gallup until Dak Prescott gets back. For Philly, though, I mean, A.J. Brown is likely going to see Travion Diggs, and Cowboy fans are going to put in the comments how much they hate me now, because once again, I'm going to bash on their boy. Travion Diggs just gives up way too many big plays. Like, he's physical, he attacks the football, but there's far too often where the dude just looks like he disappears on plays. Like he just absolutely gets smoked, like he was reading the coverage wrong or he made the wrong decision and a wide receiver slips past him and all of a sudden they have a huge play. It just feels like that happens way too often. He's probably going to see A.J. Brown this week. I'm absolutely fine with that. Yeah, there could be a little bit of a lower ceiling because of it, but A.J. Brown is just as physical as Diggs can be. These two should match up just fine. Devontae Smith on the other side could see himself a big play or two, and that's why we'll leave him as a start. Monday Night Football brings a matchup that we all would have loved to have been excited about a few weeks ago, but with the way Denver has been playing, we're just hoping that we don't get a repeat of last Thursday. For the Denver Broncos, Courtland Sutton is going to be a start for me. Now, starting Jeudy is probably going to be a little bit riskier, and that's why we've got him at a 14. But Sutton is top 12 in the league in targets per game right now, and he's top 24 in fantasy points per game among wide receivers. I understand that this offense hasn't been great, and I understand that his ceiling has not been great. But based on the volume alone, Courtland Sutton should be in your lineup as a wide receiver too. Unless you have a much higher upside play than him, like if you were to say, Kyle, do I start Gabe Davis or Courtland Sutton? If we're looking for the upside, it's absolutely Gabe Davis. But Sutton is going to be a much safer start than a lot of different wide receivers. If you were to say Kyle Courtland Sutton or Devontae Smith, I'm going to say Courtland Sutton. Yes, the offense hasn't been good, and I feel like I need to say that again. Sutton actually has been pretty good, and it's overshadowed right now. The Chargers do allow the 10th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers as well, putting together what could be, hopefully, fingers crossed, cross them with me, ladies and gentlemen, a breakout performance for Denver. For the Los Angeles Chargers, Mike Williams is going to be a high-risk start this week. In fact, he is so risky, I thought about listing him as a sit this week. I am concerned about this matchup. Denver allows the 2nd fewest fantasy points per game to wide receivers. The volume is there. The production is there. But we know from past experience that Mike Williams can disappear in matchups. He can have big matchups. He can disappear in others. This week feels like a disappearing act. But again, in a week where we have 4 teams on byes, some of which are going to have wide receivers that you would need to start, Mike Williams, to me, feels very risky, but it's going to be very hard to sit him. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Week 6 start and sit shows in the books for you. Leave a comment down below. Is there a particular wide receiver that you're most excited to watch, or a particular matchup you're most excited to watch for me this week? Subscribe if you're new here to the channel. Don't miss out on the rest of the content this season. Hit that like button for me as well if you appreciate the content. I'm going to get out of here, though. All of you stay safe and stay healthy, and I will catch you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.